My husband believed he had ended the call. The line stayed connected, however, and continued recording for exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Every single word. He called me naive. He said it in the relaxed, almost affectionate tone people use when they are completely sure no one who matters is listening. The way you might describe a golden retriever that keeps bumping into the sliding glass door. Incredibly naive. As if it were one of my most endearing traits. As if it were exactly why the entire scheme had succeeded. He was correct that I was naive. He was wrong about everything else. I was stuck in traffic on the I-90 overpass. Rain was pouring so heavily that my wipers could barely keep pace. When I phoned Daniel to let him know I would be home earlier than expected. He picked up on the third ring using that impatient voice, the one that always made me feel like an unwelcome disruption in my own marriage. I'm in the middle of something, we'll talk later. Click. Except the Bluetooth connection never dropped. My phone screen still showed the call as active. 3 seconds of quiet background noise, then his voice returned completely different. Relaxed, warm, almost amused. Good God, she can be suffocating sometimes. And then a laugh I would have recognized anywhere, even in total darkness. It belonged to Rebecca, my closest friend since our 2nd year at university, the woman who had stood beside me as my maid of honor. Who had cried through my wedding vows with the raw, beautiful intensity of someone truly moved. Who had gripped both my hands in a hospital waiting room on 3 separate occasions. 3 times. While I miscarried, and she assured me none of it was my fault, and she promised she would be there for whatever came next. That laugh. I just don't want my baby growing up confused about who his real family is, she said. In the intimate, playful tone of a woman who felt entirely at ease where she was. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. I made no sound. I did not breathe out of rhythm. The rain continued to fall and the traffic refused to move. And something inside my chest became pure glass, not shattered, simply suddenly alarmingly clear, and I remained perfectly still and I listened. Daniel's voice grew lower. The tone he used when he thought he was being exceptionally smart. Don't worry, Emily is unbelievably naive. Once the $5 million trust payment from her father lands in our joint account next month, I'll shift everything offshore. Then I file for divorce, we vanish, she'll be left with nothing. Rebecca laughed again quietly, the way she laughed when something truly pleased her, and Daniel added one final remark, soft, offhand. The kind of comment a man makes when he has carried it inside for a long time and finally feels safe enough to release it. Besides, he said, she has already shown that her body doesn't function the way it should. The miscarriages. He was joking about the miscarriages. To Rebecca, who had held my hands in that hospital room 3 times, the recording continued. 4 minutes and 12 seconds in total. I know that number precisely because I have replayed it many times since, not because of pain, because of the particular, clarifying satisfaction of someone who now possesses exactly what she needs. When the call finally ended, I remained in the traffic for a long while and breathed with great care and allowed the rain to be as loud as it wanted to be. Something immense was occurring inside me that I refused to let loose inside my car because I needed to stay clear-headed. I needed to think before I felt, perhaps for the first time in my marriage, and I needed to do it quickly. I did not head home. I drove straight to my father's office. My name is Emily Bennett Calloway, and I need you to understand something about my life before I describe how it fell apart, and then within the space of 3 weeks, rebuilt itself into something I had never imagined wanting. I grew up as the only child of Harold Bennett, who created Bennett Capital over 4 decades, beginning with a freight forwarding business. And a personal philosophy about people that he summed up in 2 simple rules. Trust slowly and never allow a snake to stay warm in your house. My father is 71 years old, short, silver-haired, and carries the particular calm of someone who has been deceived by very skilled deceivers and learned long ago to watch hands rather than faces. He had never approved of Daniel. He expressed this when I became engaged, with the careful restraint of a father who knew that warning his daughter against marrying someone was the surest way to push her toward doing exactly that. He said, "He looks impressive in public rooms, Emily. Just make certain you know who he really is in the private ones without an audience." I told him Daniel was wonderful, kind, attentive. I told him he would come around. I had been married to Daniel Calloway for 6 years. He worked as a financial consultant with a client list he protected closely, and a lifestyle that had always seemed slightly more costly than I could fully account for with his declared income. I had never looked into it too carefully. My father had established a trust in my name at age 30, $5 million scheduled to arrive in my early 30s. And Daniel had known about it since before our engagement because I had shared the information with him, because I trusted him, because I was, as he correctly noted, unbelievably naive. He was handsome in the specific manner that appears trustworthy at first glance and takes years to recognize as merely symmetry. He excelled at dinner parties. He possessed the talent of making others feel specially selected, which in the early years he had focused on me and which I had mistaken for love. Rebecca Harlow had been my closest friend since we were 20. She was the kind of beautiful that caused rooms to fall silent when she entered, and she carried it lightly, the way people carry things they have never had to question. She was witty and warm and intensely loyal. I had believed that last quality so fully that I had never once considered doubting it. She and Daniel had always interacted easily, perhaps too easily. There had been a moment at a party 2 years earlier when I stepped out of a bathroom and found them speaking in a way that paused the instant I appeared. Not obviously, just a half-second adjustment. A subtle change in their posture. I had filed it under nothing. I was always filing things under nothing. The miscarriages occurred in 2020, 2021, and 2023. If you have experienced even one, you understand what 3 of them do to a person. You understand what they do to a marriage if the marriage is not strong enough to contain them. Daniel had been present for all 3, attentive, appropriate, saying the correct things with the practiced ease of someone who knew what the correct things were. I had been grateful for his steadiness. I had not realized that steadiness and the complete absence of real emotion can sometimes look identical from the outside. Rebecca had been there for all 3 as well, considering that now I feel something I lack a precise word for, not rage, something colder. The particular chill of grasping a prolonged deception afterward when you can trace the path backward and see every spot where you trusted the surface, and it was never solid ground at all. I walked into my father's office at 6:48 p.m. Without an appointment, which his assistant Margot, who had worked for him for 22 years, immediately recognized as the kind of situation that did not require one. She ushered me straight inside. My father sat at his desk. He glanced up when I entered, and his face performed the brief, complete stillness it always does when he is evaluating a situation before speaking. A momentary total pause like a camera adjusting focus. I sat down opposite him. I placed my phone on the desk between us. I pressed play. I did not utter a single word. He listened with his eyes closed. This is how my father absorbs information he must fully comprehend. He eliminates sight from the process so nothing distracts from what he is hearing. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. His face revealed nothing except, near the 2-minute mark, a tightening at the corners of his mouth that I had witnessed twice before in my life, both times right before something important occurred. When it ended, the office fell completely silent. Then he asked, "Do you want justice or do you want revenge?" I answered both. He nearly smiled. Good. He lifted his desk phone, not his mobile, the landline, and placed 2 calls. The first went to Martin Cho, who has served as my father's private legal advisor for 19 years, and who applies a forensic accountant's precision to every aspect of human dealings, including, as it turned out, marital deception. The second went to a man named Richard Voss, who operates a private investigations firm based in Chicago and who has worked exclusively for Bennett Capital for 11 years. My father outlined the situation to each of them in the flat, factual language of a man giving orders, not seeking sympathy. He told them both, 3 weeks, complete investigation. Then he looked at me. "Does Rebecca know about the trust?" I considered it. I don't believe I ever mentioned the exact amount. Daniel told her, my father said. It was not really a question. I nodded. It was obvious now. "Go home," he said. "Act normal. Do not confront. Do not alter your behavior. Do not show any sign whatsoever that you know anything. Can you manage that?" I looked at my father. "I have been doing it for 6 years without realizing it." He stayed quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said, "I suppose you have." I went home. I prepared dinner. I asked Daniel about his day. He described a client meeting. He seemed relaxed, warm, attentive. The version of Daniel that had once made me fall in love with him. The version I now understood he activated deliberately, like a setting on a machine, when he needed me agreeable and calm. I smiled and listened and said all the right things. That night, lying next to him in the dark, I remained very still and breathed in the rhythm of someone sleeping. And I thought about the recording, and I thought about 3 miscarriages. And I thought about 6 years, and I thought about Rebecca's laugh on that phone call, the comfortable, private laugh of someone completely at home in a place that belonged to someone else. I did not sleep for roughly 3 hours. Then I made a decision somewhere in the early darkness that the next 3 weeks were simply a task. I had a role to perform, and I would perform it with total dedication because anything less would cost me everything, and I was not going to let them take anything else from me, not one more thing. The first week, Richard Voss's team set up the surveillance perimeter. Richard briefed me and Martin Cho at a private meeting in my father's offices on a Wednesday morning. He was 53, compact, a former FBI Financial Crimes Unit agent, now working privately for high-net-worth clients who required the FBI's expertise without the FBI's procedural constraints. He placed a folder on the conference table and opened it to the first page. They have been meeting at the Kimpton Hotel on Michigan Avenue for approximately 4 months, he said. Weekly, sometimes twice weekly, we have photographic evidence of 14 confirmed meetings. He laid the photographs out in a row. Exterior shots, lobby shots, 2 taken through a restaurant window that showed Daniel and Rebecca at a corner table, his hand covering hers, both of them entirely at ease and unaware. The vehicle parked at her building most Thursday evenings is registered to a Shell LLC that traces back to a leasing agreement co-signed by Daniel in June of last year. I looked at the photographs. I did not feel what I might have expected to feel. What I felt was the specific, cold confirmation of something I had already accepted in the car, in the rain, on the overpass. The photographs did not shatter anything inside me. They simply closed the last remaining distance between what I knew and what was now officially recorded. The financial trail, Martin said. Richard opened the next section. This is where it becomes significant. He guided us through it. Daniel had opened 2 accounts in the previous 8 months, one solely in his name, one under a holding company, and had been making small, regular transfers from our joint account that stayed below the reporting threshold, each one too minor to attract notice. Together, they created a systematic pipeline leading offshore. He has been testing the system, Martin said. Practicing, Richard agreed. How much has he transferred so far? Approximately $340,000. That was my money, my inheritance from my maternal grandmother that had been placed into our joint account years earlier when I believed we were creating something together. $340,000 moved in increments small enough that I might never have noticed if I had not been paying attention. Martin turned to me, the trust payment. Your father had already started the transfer process. It was scheduled for the 15th of next month. Martin nodded. We will cancel it internally and say nothing. The account will appear to process normally from Daniel's viewpoint until the moment he attempts to access it. My father said from the chair at the head of the table he needs to believe the money is arriving. That is what keeps him patient. The second week, I went shopping with Rebecca. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I drove to her apartment on a Saturday morning. I buzzed up. She came down in workout clothes, her hair in a ponytail, carrying 2 coffee cups, handing me one the way she had for years, automatic, warm, the gesture of someone who knew your order by heart. I took it and said thank you and smiled, and it fit so perfectly into the muscle memory of our friendship that for about 4 seconds, I almost forgot every word of the phone call. Almost. We walked to a baby boutique on Oak Street that she had been eager about. She had mentioned it the week before. I had written the name down. I was playing my part. She picked up tiny onesies, held them against herself, asked my opinion on colors. She was 7 months pregnant and genuinely beautiful, the round-faced, loose-limbed contentment of a woman in late pregnancy, and I stood beside her and said she was glowing, and I asked about names. And I meant none of it, and she noticed none of it. I thought about the recording the entire time. I thought about, I just don't want my baby growing up confused about who his real family is. I thought about what that meant for the baby, who was real and innocent and headed into a situation that was not his fault in any direction. I did not let myself dwell too long on that part, because that part required more grace than I had available at the moment, and grace would have to come later. When we hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, she said, you seem really good lately. Really settled? I am, I said, I really am. She squeezed my arm. I watched her walk away, and I felt something that was not quite pity and not quite anger and not quite grief, but had elements of all three. Layered under an absolute calm that surprised me every day during those 3 weeks. Where it came from, I was not entirely sure. Maybe from the car in the rain when I had needed to stay clear and had discovered something in myself that could be clear when it needed to be. The second week, Richard's team added one more piece to the file, the baby. I had not requested this information. Richard had simply noted in the clinical language of his report that the timeline of the pregnancy and Daniel's confirmed movements, as documented, had created a small but notable discrepancy. He had, with my father's authorization, requested that a paternity analysis be initiated through a private medical documentation service. Not a legal test yet, just a preliminary assessment of timelines, dates, and a cross-reference of Rebecca's medical records obtained through the channels that private investigators use when clients have the resources to authorize them. He laid the summary on the table in the third week's briefing. The timeline of the pregnancy was consistent with a conception date that overlapped with a 3-week period during which Daniel had been on a business trip to London. It was also consistent with a man named Thomas Hale, a name that appeared 3 times in Rebecca's documented contact history during the same period, associated with hotel records from the same city. Richard said nothing editorial about this. He simply laid the documents down and let the data speak for itself. My father looked at it, then he looked at me. I said nothing. There was a kind of terrible, lopsided justice in it that I did not fully process until later. Daniel had sacrificed our marriage, my trust, 6 years, 3 pregnancies worth of grief shared under false pretenses. Had spent months building an exit strategy for a future that was built on a foundation that may not have been real. He didn't know yet, neither did Rebecca. I decided I would let them discover it together. The dinner was my idea. I told Daniel I wanted to celebrate the trust payment the way it deserved, intimately at home, just the 3 of us. I said it in a way that framed it as a gift to him, a quiet marking of a new chapter. He agreed immediately. He even suggested the menu, which almost made me laugh. I cooked. I set the table with the good dishes. I opened the wine Daniel liked. I arranged the flowers Rebecca had brought, white tulips, her signature hostess gift. She had brought them to every dinner party in our friendship, in the center of the table, because their presence in that room felt accurate to me in a way I couldn't have explained. But that satisfied something precise. We ate, we talked. Daniel checked his banking app 4 times during the appetizer course. I watched his eyes drop to the screen and return to the table wearing the slightly glazed expression of a man performing presence, while his mind was somewhere offshore and counting. Rebecca was warm and attentive, the version of herself she wore in social settings, engaged, funny, asking good questions, creating the impression of someone fully present. She and Daniel were careful not to look at each other too long, disciplined. I could see the restraint in the calibration of their eye contact, the microsecond course corrections when they had held each other's gaze a beat too long. They were so proud of themselves. That was the thing that kept striking me, the pride. The barely contained satisfaction of 2 people who believed they were the smartest people in the room, who had looked at me, across years of friendship and marriage, and decided that what they saw was a soft target. After dessert, I stood up. I picked up the sealed envelope I had placed on the kitchen counter 2 hours earlier and walked to the head of the table and set it in front of Daniel. The payment arrived today, I said. Congratulations. He grabbed it before I had finished the sentence. His fingers moved quickly, tearing the flap with the eagerness of someone who has waited a long time for a thing and cannot control his own anticipation. His eyes hit the first sheet and went to the numbers immediately, which is where a man like Daniel always looks first. Then his face. The photographs were first. Richard's team had arranged them chronologically. 14 meetings at the Kimpton, the corner table, the car parked at Rebecca's building, date and time stamps on every frame. Then the financial summary. The $340,000 moved in staged transfers across 8 months. Account numbers, routing documentation, the offshore destination account with Daniel's signature on the authorization, and then the transcript, 4 minutes and 12 seconds word for word. I had formatted it cleanly like a script. Daniel, Rebecca, Daniel, so that every word was attributable and unambiguous. His voice, her laugh, and the line about my body not working the way it should. Sitting there on the page in 12-point Times New Roman, the most casual line of the conversation, the one I knew would follow him, the color left his face the way water drains from a bathtub. Not all at once, in a steady, inevitable direction, Rebecca had gone completely still. She was looking at the photographs with the focused, almost analytical expression of someone running rapid calculations. I sat back down. I folded my hands on the table. The money never reached our account, I said. Dad canceled the internal transfer the same day I played him the recording. I paused. Also, this house is owned by his company, it always has been. Which Daniel knew before we signed the lease agreement. I looked at Daniel steadily. You have 10 minutes, he found his voice. Emily, there's one more page. I slid the final document across the table. Richard's report on the timeline, the London overlap, Thomas Hale, the dates. Daniel looked at it, then at Rebecca. Rebecca looked at it, then at Daniel. And in her face, in the very specific way, the calculation behind her eyes shifted and then stopped. I saw the moment she understood what the last page meant, not just for the room, but for everything she thought she had been building, every sacrifice she thought she had made. Every future she had planned on the foundation of what was apparently not in fact certain. Her face crumbled, not performance. Genuine. Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The mouth of a man who has always had the right words available and is discovering for the first time that the